I'm 27 years old. I own a backpack, a small duffel bag, this laptop, that phone, and some clothes. I don't have a car. I don't have a bike. I don't have a home. I don't even have an apartment. This is my brother's apartment, and I'm sleeping on the floor. And for a long time, I thought this is what it meant to be free. And this journey has basically been getting to the end point of minimalism and finding out what exists on that side. And what I thought was freedom really just left me empty. Now, I don't want this to be like a sob story of everything sucks and I made a wrong decision, because I don't think I made a wrong decision. I don't think any of this was a mistake. I think it's part of a bigger plan, but I wanted to share my story with minimalism and where it's led me to, and this kind of logical endpoint of where minimalism could possibly take you. So I have some notes written down, going to be, just kind of compiled roughly my story, but then also kind of my insight into minimalism and my experience. So growing up, I was a pretty normal kid. In regards to owning stuff, I wasn't like a toy hoarder, but I did like toys. Same thing with clothes, same thing with basically everything else, other possessions that you have when you're 10 years old, 15 years old. And then I discovered minimalism, not in a super deep sense. I know there was that podcast called The Minimalists, and I think I watched a couple other episodes, but I wasn't like deep into this whole minimalism rabbit hole. But it immediately appealed to me, this idea of like being content with less. And that's kind of the journey that I've been on for maybe 5 years now, 6 years of just like owning less and less and less. And it's all led me to this point. And to be honest, like it fed a part of my ego. Like I almost began to become attached to the idea of not being attached, which is kind of a funny little paradox, and maybe some of you watching can relate. And that's kind of where I'm at now, where I went so deep into attachment to non-attachment that I'm kind of just back to square one. And it's like thinking deeper and realizing I've kind of lost the spirit of what this non-attachment really means and what it does for you, not just in a practical sense, but I think in more of like a spiritual, internal sense. This might sound kind of like an abstract example, but it's what immediately came to mind. Honestly, probably from watching the show The Chosen, and it comes from Matthew 5:21, and Jesus says, "You have heard that it is said to those of old," this is what, I don't know what version of the Bible this is, "You have heard that it is said to those of old, you shall not murder. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment." Now, the same way that I said, like, I lost the spirit of what minimalism or non-attachment means, I think it's basically in this same sense of murder being wrong, but it is wrong because hatred is wrong first. Now, overconsumption, in my view, is wrong, like blind, almost gluttonous consumption, whether it be food or jewelry or cars or clothing, all these sorts of things. Like overconsumption is wrong, but the cure is not just going to be the opposite of overconsumption, which is just getting rid of everything you own. And that's basically where I've led to. Like, this is the only pair of pants I own. They started getting holes in them. I have one pair of shorts. I couldn't tell you how many shirts I have, probably 8 to 10, and like that's all I own. And the problem was that I went that route in almost everything. Like I sold my car for kind of different reasons regarding not really using it and having to pay off the debt and only using it about half the time. Sold my bike because I'm not going to travel with my bike, and it just like became more and more and more where I just owned less and less. But all of this left me not so much feeling empty on the inside, but almost feeling disconnected in my ability to influence the external world, whether that be with building things with my hands, like lack of a garage or a space to just like put tools, like literally put tools down and build something for myself or for others, whether it be a product or just for fun as like a hobby. Like none of that is possible for me, and because of my current living situations. And I'm fortunate to have a space just a couple of blocks from here that is called Phoenix Forge, where I can build stuff there. It's like a gym membership type thing, but for a maker space, which has been really nice. But like without that, the entirety of like what I'm building is online. It's at the mercy of the internet. It's at the mercy of Wi-Fi speeds. And at the end of the day, life is not lived online. Like as soon as you close the laptop, as soon as I close this laptop, it's like this is real life. Eating food, talking to real people, going to cafes, traveling, all these things are really what matters. So with all this, I think what started prompting this question was asking myself, most people that know me would probably label me a conspiracy theorist, which is fine. But I started asking myself the hypothetical of like how much of what I've built would exist or stand if the internet went down. The reason I mentioned conspiracy theories, it's like, the internet is such, I think we view it as such a strong, like immovable object, but it is at the mercy of these data centers, electricity, power, and all these world powers and tensions going on all at the same time. Like this whole grid we call the internet, where so much of our lives live, is at the mercy of some kind of collapse at any given moment. Now, I'm not saying I think it's going to collapse anytime soon, but I still think it was a good exercise to ask myself how much of what I built would be real without the internet. And unfortunately, what prompted me to make this video was I realized none of it would be real. Like, would I have savings? Yes. Would I have a skill that requires the computer? Yes, I have many skills outside of the computer, but none of which have been built into anything tangible, whether it be a business or land or a farm or anything of that nature. Like that is non-existent. My online business exists, but that is fully at the mercy of the internet. And at 27 years old, that's not the route I want to be in by any means for the rest of my life. And thinking deeper into this, the internet came around, I think it was in the late 90s, I'm not sure. So it's roughly been 25, 30 years of the internet being around. And for not that long before, maybe there was like newspapers or things like that, like the entirety of human life and civilization existed in the real world. There was no such thing as online communities, online events, online products, all these things that we just attach the word online to. And I think it's in our human nature and our God-given design to, this sounds obvious, but like to not live on the internet, like not live in this artificial, intangible world. Like we've been around for, depending on who you ask, how many tens of thousands of years. And for 99.9% of that time, everything was face to face. Everything was real. Everything was tangible. If you were a craftsman, it was of a physical craft. And maybe if it was slightly intellectual, like script writing for plays or books or governmental things, it would still be real and tangible, and you could touch it, smell it, hold it, all of those things. And the next point this brought me to too was, I'm someone who wants to start a family, have children, have land, have a home, all of these things in the future. And this again sounds so obvious and stupid, but you cannot start a family out of a backpack. Now, with enough money, like of course you can live out of Airbnbs, you can constantly fly, you can constantly travel. But historically, this is just me reasoning through what might have happened in the past. Of course, there was millions of people all over the world in different circumstances, but a family that was constantly on the move was typically doing so not out of freedom or adventure. They were doing it out of like war, threat, instability, all sorts of negative associations that are associated with like stress and scarcity, right? Nowadays, we've kind of flipped the script where the infinite form of freedom is location freedom and financial freedom to do whatever you want, wherever you want, with no consequences, full detachment. If you don't like the weather, you can leave. If you haven't made enough friends here, you can leave and find it somewhere else. And that's the life that I lived for roughly the past 4 years. I would travel, meet people, do adventures, like all of these things. But whenever it wasn't enough, I would go somewhere else and I would go somewhere else. And it would build this cycle of whenever anything wasn't good enough, whether it was people or weather, environment, safety, food, etc., I would just go somewhere better. And in that, I had the infinite freedom, but again, it left me just feeling fully empty inside. There's nothing that I own. There's nothing that I've built that exists outside of the internet. So I really don't think we've ever been designed to constantly look for the next place. The whole idea of the grass is always greener on the other side. I think this, I want to even call it like an epidemic of travel, like this idea that like travel is the ultimate good and anything that leaves you stuck in your hometown is an ultimate bad. And I think the truth, like many things, exists in the nuance, in the middle of that, where if something is not serving you and you are not able to serve it well enough to what you would like to do, like yes, there's an opportunity to leave, but to leave at any slight level of inconvenience, again, whether it's financial or safety or weather or friends, any of those things, is also not the solution, right? It's back to like the law versus the spirit of the law. Is attachment necessarily a good thing? You know, like a fully you depend on a thing like money or whatever. Is that good? No, but is the complete opposite of that? Maybe a better example would be the clothing. Like, is it good to be fully attached to the need to your favorite clothing and your favorite jewelry brands? No. But is the opposite of that complete abandonment of all clothing and all jewelry and all pleasures of life, whether that be food or clothing or certain vacations, activities? Probably not either. And like I mentioned before, with like many things, it seems like the truth often exists in the middle in some form of nuance. The way that I picture it in my mind is like there's two extremes, right? There's the extreme of indefinitely piling on trash. That would be the maximalist, consumerist view, where it's never enough TV shows, it's never enough music, it's never enough entertainment and stimulation and new foods and new restaurants and new clothes and new cars and it just vacations, and it just goes and goes and goes, and like, oh, I've only visited 30 countries, my friends visited 80 countries. It just doesn't end. But to me, not that any of those things in and of themselves are trash, but the infinite piling of them just creates this massive pile of trash of like disposable goods, things like clothing and processed foods. Just no meaning, no attachment, no character, nothing that can age well with time, and you can actually feel like you've created something and you've built something that you own and that you're proud of, not in a prideful way, but in a way that you can pass on to others, either generationally or just locally with friends, family, and you can share in the fruit of whatever you've built. It could be a farm, could be a business, a store, an education system, whatever it might be. So that's the one extreme of like indefinite consumerist maximalism. And the opposite of that is the indefinite subtraction. So you just erase, erase, erase. It's like, that's too much clothes, that's too many friends, that's too many TV shows. Oh, I don't listen to music, I don't do this, I don't do that. And you're just basically becoming someone who owns nothing. And again, like I described, almost feels empty inside. And I think too, if you look at all of the things we admire most that have been built by humans, like those amazing cathedrals and other buildings, primarily in Europe, that have been standing for hundreds or thousands or over 1,000 years, or just beautiful homes or craftsmanship, items, maybe it's pocket knives or pans or clothing, or leather goods, jeans that were made back in the day that just last decades, or in the case of buildings, last hundreds of years. Like all of those required physical presence. You had to learn a craft, you had to go through the difficulties of staying in one place, working with the local materials, working with the local workers and infrastructure and laws and tension and wars and whatever it was. And those are the only things, if you look at what do we admire from the past, it was only the things that were built with stability, location stability, intentionality, a multi-decade view, not this super like fragile, flexible thing where it's like you can just change your business online, you can just move everything online, you can be an in-person personal trainer and just move everything online. And then you end up losing like the spirit of what it meant to actually help people in person. That's just a random example, but the same thing can be said about all sorts of things, including my business. So to sum all of this up, first in kind of like my take on minimalism, and then kind of where I see my future going in terms of, I don't want to say like recovering from minimalism, because I really don't think it's that deep for me personally. But again, I wanted to share my perspective and story of like I said in the beginning, like I took minimalism to its logical end. You could say I have a little bit more to go. If I got rid of the laptop and the phone and a little bit more clothes, I would really hit like the rock bottom end of what it means to be minimalist. But for all intents and purposes, I think I'm 99% of the way there. So I think minimalism is a tool, especially today where we're just in the maximalist consumer view, with advertising, marketing, like everyone's advertising to you that you need something else that you haven't yet discovered. Again, whether it's, I know I've reiterated this, but vacations, clothing, food, superfoods, jewelry, cars, people, like the list goes on and on and on. Like everything's not good enough wherever you are now. And I think minimalism is a tool that can help you either temporarily or indefinitely detach from certain things like this, but it cannot be the foundation. Like no one, again, this is my view, but like no one historically has built something that lasted, especially without the internet, but internet hasn't been around that long. Built something that has lasted not just physically, but even in the like spirit of what it means to be human and what it means to build something that's beautiful and that you can be proud of and can last generations and can impact people beyond. I don't think anyone has built that on the backbone of extreme minimalism. It cannot be the foundation. So the answer isn't necessarily less, but it most definitely isn't more. It's the intention behind what it is that you own and what it is that you're building. Are you building this pile of garbage, or are you building with intention, with whether it's the food you eat or the communities in which you engage in or the business that you have or the family that you have? Like, is it intentional, or is it just set as a default and kind of taking that maximalist consumer view? And then what can your heart actually hold on to? There's this idea, I think it's 100 or 150, that historically speaking, humans were only meant to know. I'll get into what that means, but like meant to know 100 to 150 people very well. And I think that comes from the idea of like the average tribe size, or even like village size, depending on, tribe, village, I don't know what the difference is, tended to be about that big, where you would know roughly 150 people very well. And I'm sure there'd be other people that you would encounter here and there, but that would be like your tribe or village or community. And I think the same thing again can be said about clothing, places you live, all animals, everything. Like there's a sweet middle spot where you accept the reality of what it means to be human and what it means to live in a physical world with items, with the ability to create things, create technology, laptops, rugs, couches, foods, kitchens, homes, all of these things. Like we have this innate ability to create them. So to live a life of full detachment from them, I think one is, in my experience, again, a dangerous route. And you can even start becoming attached to the idea of non-attachment, which again, in my experience, is not a good thing. And accepting that both can be true, that you can learn to detach from the things that are not either serving you mentally or physically, but also make it okay to attach things that you want to sort of attach to your life's purpose. Again, whether that's a business or a family or things that you're proud of, things that you build with your hands or kitchens, homes, whatever it might be, structures that last hundreds of years. In terms of where I think this is going to lead me in the coming months and years, hopefully, as I kind of, again, heal or relearn what it means to be attached to things and build things and have, physical tie downs. In the coming months, my girlfriend and I are moving, to Colorado for about 2.5 months. Then we're going to Greece, and then we're coming back. And from there, it's kind of the decision point of like, where are we going to settle and like set down some roots for a significant period of time. I don't know what significant period of time means, but from someone coming from averaging probably 2 to 3 months at a spot for many years now, like it's going to be on the magnitude of years, which is something that I know I need and will allow me to do so much that I haven't been able to do because I haven't just had roots anywhere for so long. But at the same time, I know that there's now years of built up habits of not owning anything and simultaneously being content with not owning, but also always feeling like something's missing. It's like I've almost found comfort in the non-attachment, but comfort, as many of you probably watching know, is not always the answer. Like you can find comfort in like always just being good enough. Like, oh, you're not super unhealthy, but you're not working towards radical health, or you're not super wealthy, but you're also not super poor. It's just this comfort zone that oftentimes a lot of ideas just go to die. So I'm very comfortable in this state of non-attachment, but again, that comfort is preventing me from doing, for example, I'm trying to build this like gelatin jello alternative brand, and I'm doing it out of my brother's apartment studio kitchen. It works. It's more than enough, but it's pretty ridiculous to, it's kind of a cool startup story, but it's not exactly the dream situation of how I would want to do it. So that's where I'm at. And I think a big one, just to kind of reiterate on the notes, you cannot build a family, you cannot build anything out of a backpack, at least for my view of like what a thing means, like a real thing that can outlast the internet and that actually has like a tangible, real effect on people, either other people or yourself or your family or those very close to you. And if any of this didn't make sense or you have any questions, thoughts, feedback, I would love to hear it in the comments. I've been also trying to work on my ability to speak and communicate well without too many filler words. That's been a big one. So would love to hear feedback on my speaking skills. I'll see you in the next video.